Hey everyone, thanks very much for sending in your questions on Instagram. It was really interesting. There's some great questions and it's actually made me think a bit and I'm really looking forward to answering them for you. I wanted to start off with one of the most interesting questions. Now I actually answered this one a bit briefly initially on Instagram, wasn't quite clear with my wording and then kind of came back to reword that. The question was, what needs to change in long distance cycle racing to make more types of people do it? And it is a really good question. Now when I read it first time I saw the word change and I thought, what needs to change from the way we are currently? And I answered sort of nothing, in a bit flippant way, but then also saying that we're doing quite a lot and the sport's growing. Because race organisers and people within the community are doing a lot and that's really important. Much more than people are doing in other sports, I believe. And to say that we need to or they need to change is perhaps a bit, incorrect because they're doing a hell of a lot already. So if we take the question again and we alter the word change to improve, we can look at it in a different way and we can talk about the things that we can and are currently doing within the sport to improve accessibility. Now obviously, like in other sports and other areas of cycling, one of the primary issues is increasing the participation rate for women and Black, Asian and ethnic minorities because there's not enough representation, and this is sort of across the board. Cycling as a whole has a huge sort of bias towards white, middle, young to middle-aged males, and that is something that we still definitely see in these races. If you're hanging around at one of the finish, the predominantly faces that you're going to see are white young males. Now necessarily as myself as a person, I don't really have the answers to that question. And it's perhaps incorrect for me to speak out about ways to deal with that. But I think one of the things that is happening is there are a lot more role models coming through for people to look at. And those people then show that it is accessible and possible and also normal for people like you to be doing this. Personally, the things I can be doing about that is just continuing to do what I do and hope that, although I am, that stereotypical person that we see at these races, the acts and the way that I, carry myself is still inspirational to all sorts of people, and I hope that is the case. I also answered the question on Instagram, coming back to it, saying some other areas of things I think we can improve on are improving the finish rate and reducing dropout rate, making races easier to follow and more live content, improving race experience, so the format, the location and the routing. And I said, but growth takes time to happen, and you've got to do this while maintaining a purity and a spirit. And if we look at what some of the race organisers are doing at the moment, incredible amounts of work is going into improving that accessibility and improving the routes and improving the opportunities for people. So if you look at Transcontinental, back initially Mike sort of brought the whole social media aspect to Transcontinental and improved the coverage so that people could see what was going on. Before that, no one had a clue in these races. Since then, Anna's taken that forward, and this year started the grant initiative, whereby if you wanted to enter the race, you had to pay a small fee. Then that small fee went into a pot where the money was able to be divvied up to people who perhaps couldn't afford to do these races because they can be expensive, or for minority people who just deserved a grant to help them get to the start line and to get to the finish, which is a fantastic initiative. And I don't think you're seeing many of that in other areas. You have Camille with his further race who has a 50-50 split, so he actually makes sure that there is the same amount of women as men doing the race, not just prioritising women getting into it, which is again is fantastic. Nelson with Silk Road and Atlas Mountain Race, he always has local riders competing in the race, which is fantastic. We went to Kyrgyzstan, we met some local Kyrgyz people and saw them. We went to Morocco, same thing there, and Mohammed did an incredible job. We've had the race around Rwanda this year where there have been local cyclists there. And so taking these races to new places is allowing the sport to grow and develop and more people to come into it. So I think we don't really need to change, because I think so many people in the community are doing so much incredible work already, and we're leaps and bounds beyond many other sports because of the spirit and the purity that we have in this sort of niche area. So it's absolutely fantastic. And I think as we continue to grow as a sport and develop slowly, while maintaining that purity and spirit, these things are going to start to flourish, and we're going to see more people come in, and we're going to keep dealing with these issues that we can to improve. So it's brilliant. Second question I got was bike wheel and choice. Could you use a gravel bike with 40mm tyres, or was the terrain too technical? I actually had another question about the right bike, hardtail gravel bike as well, so I thought I'll address those all in one. The Atlas Mountain Race, what you saw in the film, as Jay sort of addressed in the Q&A, wasn't really reflective of all of the terrain in the race, because the cars that were filming could only access the easy to get to places. So you saw more of the smooth and nice surfaces, while we rode a lot of the really rocky and horrible things. Now, the question, could you do it on 40mm tyres? Yes, you could. Would I want to? Not really, no. The reason is that you're going to have to pay more attention as you're riding down technical sort of rocky descents. You're going to be bumped all over the place. Whereas if you've got front suspension, it's going to smooth that out. Now, if you had a gravel bike with 40mm tyres and you were riding a section of the route for perhaps 6 hours or so, then it's going to be fine, because the length of the vibration and the duration of that isn't really going to be a problem. But when you start to talk about doing it over 3 to 5 to 6, 7 days, the fatigue build up from that is going to be immense, and therefore the bike choice and tyre choice that you're going to want to make is going to change as the duration of the event becomes longer. Also, some of the tyres that are available in 40mm aren't as tough and as strong as the wider mountain bike tyres, so you might have to deal with more punches and things like that. I ran WTB Rangers, and up front I had a 2.4, and on the back I had a 2.25 in inches. Mountain bike, I like to do it that way for some reason, and I got no punches at all. Absolutely not a single problem with punches. So for me, running like the Canyon Exceed with front suspension was pretty much the perfect choice. Could I do it on something that took wide mountain bike tyres, 60-65mm tyres without suspension? Yes, but would it be a bit more difficult and fatiguing? Yes. Would the descents be less fun? Yes. And so really, just because you could do something on a certain type of bike doesn't mean it's the best decision when you take in all of the factors. And so that's why I decided to take a Canyon Exceed rather than a Grail. You could ride it on a Grail if you wanted to, but you'd find some bits quite challenging. And then if you think about the fact that you're riding down some of the descents or some of the terrain at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're pretty tired, and you've only got your bike light, you can't see so well, picking out the rocks and the holes and things is going to become a lot more difficult. So you're going to spend a lot of time riding into stuff that you shouldn't or don't really want to. And so having a more durable setup is pretty good for that situation as well. Question you got, you found the flat bars better option for comfort and control. Flat bars with mountain bikes with their levers, is really good for control. Obviously, mountain bikers are riding those type of bikes for enduro, downhill, and XC because the handling is a lot better than on a drop bar bike. If you have really flared drops on a drop bar bike, you can get reasonably good control, but it's never going to be as good as a flat bar. I wouldn't put drop bars onto a mountain bike because I don't really understand that. What you can do, and some people did do, was put aero bars onto their mountain bike flat bars, which then you sort of get the mountain bike setup, which is good for when you're climbing or descending, and then you got the aero bar set up for on the flats, and so you're pretty well covered. I don't think that riding drops in that way is great, but I can understand why they are on gravel bikes, because then you have more hand positions and hand options. I think if I'm riding a mountain bike, then I'm going to be on flats, and I like that with the ergo grips. It works really well. I've actually been experimenting with like the degrees of flared on the handlebars. So the normal mountain bike is 9 degrees. At Silk Road Mountain Race, I used the Jones bars, which were 45 degrees, but I found that too much. And I've been using something between 16 and 12 degrees flared at the moment from SQ Lab. and I found that in that range is quite nice. It gives me a nice wrist angle to reduce the fatigue and strain on my wrists, but is not too aggressive either. So yeah, I think you have to play around yourself personally. Yeah, lots of people are asking about the gravel bikes. Pick for comfort over like raw speed, and you'll enjoy yourself a lot more. You'll be smiling as you fly down the descents, as you saw in the film when we went down that amazing descent. I was smiling all the way. Someone asked, how much water did you carry? And it's a good question. In the Atlas Mountains in February, it was actually really hot, and the other problem was that we were all coming from winter climates, so we weren't adapted to the heat. I could carry about 3.5 litres in my frame bag in the bladder in there, and then I could carry another bottle if I needed. I didn't actually need to carry another bottle with me at any point in time, but I did sort of down a couple litres when I was stopped at a shop, max everything out, and then ride on. And then there were points where I was pushed to maybe 3 hours without water, which wasn't ideal. There's not much you can do. I wouldn't really recommend that. In Silk Road Mountain Race, I actually took 2 bladders. So I had nearly 7-8 litres of water capacity, because there were some sections there that could have been completely dry for 12, 16, maybe even 24 hours. And so I was pretty loaded up. And I mean, that's 8 kilos of weight if I was fully topped up, so it's pretty heavy. I think in that, that's about 4 litres max capacity is probably all right. If you are quite a bit slower covering terrain, then you might need to increase that depending upon, you know, how fast you can cover terrain and your risk attitude to that. How did you train for the event? Interesting question, because it obviously happened in February. Training was a bit more difficult because you kind of had to ride through winter, and obviously with the rain and the snow coming from the UK, it's not ideal. I don't think anyone at the race was at 100% fitness, so that sort of evens that playing field out a bit. But then it was just sort of my normal training, so putting in some longer rides, 6 hours, doing that back to back at the weekends. Obviously I was at university, so quite busy at certain periods, so I couldn't be knocking out huge miles like I really would like to, like I am able to in the summer. So then I was doing some hard intervals or effort sessions as well. I like things around 10 minutes, 4 by 10 minute sessions, and I can do that session every week, build up, and I can see myself increasing and using the power meter and things. I very much prescribe to like a polarized sort of training, so that means you're doing a lot of steady, I won't say easy because it's not easy, but steady rides that are a long duration, and by the end of 6 hours that takes a long time, and for me that does a lot of good stuff to help train my body. And then I do a lot of hard efforts as well to build my aerobic system so that I can ride fast. I don't think the training I do is right for everyone because it works for me, and it's taken me years to sort of realize that actually I need to just train in quite a simple way. And it's also the way I very much enjoy riding my bike. I very much just enjoy going out and riding all day, and that's why I do that. If you don't enjoy that, then you very much need to train in the way that you do enjoy, because you will do more of it. And it's important that you enjoy riding a bike. So don't be doing training that you don't enjoy just so that you can achieve results, because it's going to end up in a vicious cycle of hating the bike in the end. Someone asked, how often did you sleep and where? So the easiest way to deal with this is we started at 9 o'clock in the morning. On the first night I wasn't feeling great, so I stopped and slept quite early, about 10:30, and I slept for 3 hours. I woke up and then rode through the rest of the night into the next day. The second night I slept for, again, 3 hours. The third night I slept for 1 hour and a half, and then the fourth night I slept for, I took a 20-minute power nap on the fourth night. So that's a bit under 7 hours sleep total across the race. A reasonable amount of sleep. I could have slept less and have slept less in previous races, but I didn't go into this race feeling great, and then I didn't feel great on the first day, so I took a bit of sleep to try and help sort my body out. And I think the attitude that I take to sleep is very much, if I feel I need it, I take it, because trying to ride through deep periods of sleep deprivation for me can really slow me down, whereas if I take a little bit of sleep and then get going again, I can gain that time back and be faster. So don't feel that you need to be sleep deprived and ride through the night and all these kind of things to be doing well. You don't. You've got to listen to your body and adapt to the situation and work with how you're feeling at that point in time so you can continue being strong. Did you suffer from boredom? Not really. The only point that I was bored in the entire race was when we had a tarmac section that took about 4 hours in the middle of the night, and that was mind-numbingly boring. Tarmac is very boring nowadays. The beauty of off-road racing, and especially in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco, is it's so beautiful. I mean, you're just permanently looking around and taking things in and soaking it in, so there's not a single moment to be bored, because it's just incredible. I'm out riding my bike, seeing new places and doing exactly what I love, so it's like heaven. No, not bored in the slightest. Did you listen to much music? And what was your go-to song? I did listen to some music. I didn't listen to that much. Sometimes I need to, sometimes I don't. If I'm having a hard period, I can often listen to music because it helps suck me out of that moment. But most of the time I can find myself in like a Zen sort of state, and I'm just quite comfortable within myself and enjoying the moment. I think if I was listening to music in that race, it would have been all sorts of things depending upon on the mood I was in. It's something upbeat, something a bit softer, some rock, whatever I've got going on my Spotify, really. Someone asked the question, how do you train your mental strength for these type of long distance races? I think it's a good point to address because mental strength is incredibly important. Okay, you've got to be fit to do these races, but being mentally strong is what gets you across the line. So fitness physically is like useful for the first day or two, but after the second day, it's really just about raw mental strength. And if you could have one of the two, mental strength is far more important than physical. How do you train mental strength? I think doing these races, every time you do one, you're going to have to problem solve, learn, and be put in those situations where you are forced to grow, and that's going to help develop it. Things that might happen in your daily life might teach you to be a stronger person and to deal with difficult situations. It is, problem solving is quite important, so dealing with things before they arise, like I talked about with sleeping. You need to adapt to how your body is and deal with those situations so that you can sort of be flexible, so that you can ride when you're good and not ride when you're bad. And that comes to mental strength as well, to sort of understanding yourself, being comfortable with that and making the right decisions rather than just feeling that you need to push on. Obviously you're going to have difficult moments, and then at that point one of the things I like to do is sort of remind myself why I'm doing this, and it's because I enjoy this, it's meant to be fun, and so I just try and find a way to get back to that fun and think about the end goal, which would be finishing, because it's when you finish that you find the fulfillment and the achievement and the satisfaction that you want. And thinking about that emotion of fulfillment when I get to the finish is more than enough to drive me through anything. And generally anyone that's starting one of these races has invested a lot of time, energy, money, sacrifices to get there to the start, to do it. And so to be able to finish it is sort of vindication on everything that they and perhaps people around them have sacrificed. You're not always going to be able to finish, but generally you can find a way to get through most things. And there are some people that you can look at in doing these races that you think, this person is nothing special or whatnot. And I'm not going to give examples to this, but I know a few people, and you might look at them and think, they're not so special, they're not much. But then you see them race and you see them finish, and perhaps their physical fitness is really nothing special, but their mental strength is on another level. And it's those people that really impress me, because they know so much about themselves and they're so comfortable with themselves and they can deal with these situations. And generally they're the ones that turn up at the finish and are really quiet and completely unassuming. And so those are the people to go and speak to learn from and ask them how they deal with these things. So I think get some experience, look at yourself in the mirror, find out who you are as a person and deal with your faults and your problems and your weaknesses so that you can overcome those and manage those. And then just think about the fulfillment of finishing, because that'd be enough to get you there. One of the other questions that I got was a bit more lighthearted. What the hell do you do against saddle sores? So actually in the Atlas Mountain race I had no saddle sores at all. It's a 4-day race, so you probably shouldn't really be having issues over that length. Once it starts to get longer you might have some more abrasion sort of issues. But I've dealt with it in sort of a few ways, but I've found a saddle that works for me. It's very comfortable. I have very good bib shorts that fit me perfectly with a nice chamois in there. I never use chamois cream. I don't think it's good for you personally. I don't think you need to be using it. For me, it just seems like you're going to be making things dirtier, and that's sort of unhygienic. And then the fourth one is hygiene. You just keep clean, and then you could perhaps use some. I use some microbial kind of cream called Dermal, and that's really great. And it just sort of bit moisturizing, also kind of kills germs and things like that, and it works fantastically. So saddle sores aren't a given. You shouldn't just have to accept them, but you do need to find what works for you. The general concept of a good saddle, good shorts, and then good hygiene are sort of the 3 main points. And then from there are other things that you can look at more personally. But don't subscribe to the fact that you need to be using loads of chamois cream and all that, because it's not correct. So I think I've answered most of the questions here. Obviously a lot of gravel bike, mountain bike kind of questions, some more in-depth ones about mental strength, sleeping strategy and these sort of things. I could talk all day about this kind of stuff because it's absolutely fascinating for me, but I don't want to go on and on. But if you've got any sort of follow-up questions about anything that I've said, or you want to readdress anything, then please reach out to me in the comments, and I'll be more than happy to talk about anything in incredible detail, because it's just fascinating for me. So I've really enjoyed sharing some of my thoughts with you. The Atlas Mountain Race was absolutely amazing, and if you're thinking about doing it, I thoroughly recommend taking it on, because it was just so beautiful. Thanks for listening.